Good evening. Welcome to the January 28th, 2025 City Council meeting. I hereby call the meeting to order. Members of the public may attend this council meeting in person or may watch and or listen remotely by viewing the meeting on Channel 8 WCTV and at the city's website www.wayzata.org/WCTV. Public comment during the public forum and or public hearing portions of the meeting may be provided in person at the meeting in advance or by logging into the Zoom call and raising your hand during the public hearing. When your name is called in the meeting, you will be seen and heard in our council chambers and on the cable channel and website. You will be asked to unmute and then you may begin your comment. All public comments must include your full name and address. The second item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. If I could ask everyone to stand if you are able and follow along.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. Next is roll call. Let's see, everyone is present with the exception of Councilmember Sorensen, who has an excused absence. I will note that earlier this evening, the council participated in a workshop and discussed and reviewed the following: an update and discussion of a planned parks improvement project for Claperick Park, specifically guidance to staff on scope, budget, and timing to help guide a formal review of that item at a future council meeting for action. The next item is to approve the agenda. Could I have a motion to approve the agenda, or does anyone want to make any adjustments?
I would like to make an adjustment.
Okay,
I would like to remove item 8C for a further, to be discussed and/or approved in a further, later meeting. This was something that I had brought up. I think the best thing that I can do that we can make the best policy is, my intent is to go take this class and to assess whether this is something that I think is necessary for everybody in town who wants to rent their house. And who's it appropriate for, whether it's worthwhile time-wise, and to make a informed judgment on this as opposed to just saying, I don't like it, I think it's a waste of time.
okay, so I'll just check with city manager and city attorney. So I think we have a proposal from Councilmember Parkhill to sort of eliminate item 8C from the agenda. Is that something that we can do?
Mr. Mayor, City Attorney Schelzel, there are two suggestions or two options. One is just to eliminate it. This would be on our minutes, and we could put it on a future agenda if that's what the council approves. Or we could, when the item comes up, if the council is willing, they could also table the item to a defined period of time, so there's a little bit more direction for the public as to when it could come back.
I would prefer that. Is that acceptable to you, Councilmember
Absolutely
Parkhill?
fine.
We could table it, so we'd have it, and then you would make a motion to table it. If there's a second and support of that, then we would do that at that time.
Okay.
Okay. Any others?
Can I ask a question about this one? When you say you have to put a definite time frame on the table, because I was going to bring some comments to this body about that item in terms of public engagement through our plans of looking at short-term rental ordinances. Can you table it until that, or does it have to be tabled for the next meeting or something?
So maybe a suggestion would be to wait till we get to the item, and then we can hear a motion, and then you can offer your comments, and then we can decide if we're going to table it or hear it. Does that make sense? So you'll get a chance to weigh in and guide whether we table or continue. Is that acceptable to everybody?
And Mayor, council member, in terms of tabling, as a matter of a procedure, you could just table it to a future meeting or direct to a specific future meeting. And when we get there, we can elaborate on your options.
Cool. All right. So I still need a motion to approve the agenda, and I think it will be approved as is. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
And are there any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, the motion passes. Next on our agenda is the public forum. Just as a reminder for the vast viewing audience that are here, that if you're interested in speaking, please fill out a card and state your name, address, and if you're representing a group, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. If it's on the agenda, fill out a form at the table and hand it for staff. For those, again, who might be watching online or via Zoom, please note via chat to staff and let them know which agenda item you would like to speak about. We will also require that your camera be turned on. So we have 2 items for the public forum. Do we have any online public forum requests or any cards?
Not at this time, Mr.
Okay, so we have 2 items of recognition this evening. So we actually have 3 community members that are stepping down in their course of their commission, and we're honoring 2 tonight and 1 at a future meeting. Unfortunately, tonight we'll be honoring Lisha Stockton and Polly Anderson, and in our next meeting, I believe we'll be honoring Marilee Babcock. So I would turn it over to City Manager to start with honoring Larissa Stockton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know it's been, Commissioner Stockton has been called out a couple times at recent meetings because of her resignation from the Planning Commission, just because, you know, it's bittersweet. We're happy for her that she's moving on, but we're going to miss her too. So typically, though, we do more of a formal recognition, and of all of our community members out there who volunteer, you know, she deserves a formal recognition, I think, more than most, just because of the work she's done, the thoughtfulness of her approach at Planning Commission meetings, the leading of very complex, controversial development projects that we have in this community. So we do have a recognition award for her. I'll go around to the podium for her 4+ years of service on the Planning Commission. So I would, Mayor, if you want to.
Let's see if any other council members would like to say words, and then we can go over to the podium and maybe put Larissa on the spot and make her say a few things.
Perfect.
Would anyone else like to weigh in on any comments for Commissioner Stockton?
Go ahead.
Go. Start this side.
I have nothing prepared. However, as I mentioned last time, it was an absolute pleasure to work with you. I always loved just listening to what you had to say, because it always was, number one, articulate, number one, thoughtful, but there was like, when you would talk about, I remember being on the design review committee with you also, and the things that you would talk about were things that I didn't think about. And so I really appreciated the way you viewed the world in a very aesthetic way. And the way you talked was in a very aesthetic way. And you would describe things in 3 dimensions as opposed to my 1 dimension. And so I just really appreciated that. And I want to compliment you on that. And it was fun to work with you. And the one thing that I learned kind of on Planning Commission before I even got to council was that when we would I'll sit up here at the dais, and I'd be like, I'm not sure which direction I'm going to go on this decision. And we'd all have a different thought, and we'd come to a conclusion together. And, you know, it was great to see us solve these problems, because you had good minds up there, and you have different opinions and views and things that are important to different people, and it would all get thrown out on the table. And I always felt like we made really good decisions, and you were 100% a part of that.
Thank you. Others?
I too don't have any prepared remarks.
But
And I too could reiterate what I said the last time, but I won't reiterate that. But what I will say is that I think I was maybe one of the first people to approach you about, you know, doing things for the city, and you have been absolutely wonderful. Fulfilled all the things that I thought. But one thing I said at one point along the way in public forum here, and it wasn't about you particularly, but you are a prime example of what I said, which is that I value the perspectives of diversity of thought, particularly that of females versus male. And what I've discovered over time, and you're an example of that, where I'd be just listening intently on what you had to say, and I would think to myself, wow, I never would have thought of that. And it sometimes would change my mind on things. So I appreciate all the things you've done for the city. I will officially miss you, but I think we'll still be in touch outside of that. So that's it.
Well, I did write a whole speech. I didn't. But it's hard to add on to all the kind words that were so true. But one thing I would like to note, Larissa, is you brought a fresh perspective to the city, and I think that was just such an asset. You have literally a world of knowledge and craft and skill, and the city was so lucky to be able to tap into that, and you were so generous to serve and offer that. So keep in touch. I don't know if you're going anywhere, but so thank you for all that. And Larissa and I have another history together that I also am so grateful for. So anyways, that's all I had to say.
Thank you. I just have a couple brief words. I first met you and your family, I think when you first moved to town, which was like 14 or 15, right around there. So I've known you for a while. And when I think about your service, even though I wasn't serving in this room, I was watching from afar. And three things stood out, and it kind of were reflected in the conversation we had this week, Larissa, is that you have this world experience. You literally have lived all over the world. And I know it was important to you and your family to establish some roots somewhere, and you chose Wayzata, even though I think you came from the East Coast originally, but you've lived everywhere else. And it's just great that you established your roots here, and then you chose public service as an additional way to deepen those roots. And second, I think Jeff mentioned this, you were a marvelous contributor in the Planning Commission, but you also played a very significant role in the Design Standards Task Force to help address some of the bigger issues in design that the town was facing about the conflict between large building footprints and small-scale charm, viewscapes, and just brought a tremendous amount of insight to that process. And then I think certainly your contributions on the Wells Fargo project stood out. That was a very large project under your purview as the vice chair and chair of the Planning Commission. And so for those three things, I note your service, and we'll miss you, but something tells me you're not done. I think there might be other ways that you'll be serving your community. I'm just guessing. With that, maybe, Jeff, we could just do the formal hand over the plaque, and then Larissa, if you want to make any comments, and then we'll move on. Thank you.
Thank you. I can tell you how it goes later.
Okay.
Don't drop it.
Ms. Stockton, thank you for your 4+ years of service to our community, giving back so much. We appreciate your commitment, and you will be missed very much so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you so much. Look at that.
And I think the mayor wanted to, and
Yeah, you're
also
welcome to
wants
say something. You don't have to, but if you want.
We'd love to
I would
roast you a
love-
little bit.
That's not a bad idea. No, I just want to say thank you to all of you, first and foremost, for accepting my application all those years ago, whoever was here then, to serve the community. It's really been a pleasure to do it. And thank you for those beautiful comments. It's overwhelming, really is. And you hit the nail on the head, Andy. Well, first of all, I'd like to say you all have an excellent memory for non-prepared speeches. But you hit the nail on the head. It was really important to me to find ways to connect deeper with my community. Traveling and living in different places is wonderful, broadening experience. But equally important, if not more so, is connecting to your community and figuring out ways to contribute what you have to offer, and watching those contributions take seed and seeing, what they do. So that's been a very rewarding process, much more rewarding than I had anticipated. I'm just grateful to have had the opportunity to do it and to serve as vice chair with you, Jeff, and as chair for a couple of years. I admire the spot right in the middle very much, who's ever doing it, because it is one where you have to think and plan a meeting. Very challenging to do. because, you know, you got to stay on task, and even when you're not, you have to look as though you are. So there's also a little bit of acting potentially involved in this role, but it's really been a joy. And I have gotten to know each and every one of you in different ways, and, you know, I've learned something from each one of you. And, you know, Molly, I'm so excited to see the seed of the design that we started together blossom in your recent remodel. Andy, yep, since 2015 when I moved here. I think ZZ Top was featured here and quite noisy, although we've gotten noisier. I'm not going to even go there.
Just did.
Too soon. And Alex, you know, we've had lots of conversations about the city. I've learned a tremendous amount. We have a mutual interest in an outside organization, which has just been interesting as well. And obviously our interest in planning and development in Arizona and Scottsdale, good conversations. And I just have received so much benefit. It's almost imbalanced, really, in terms of the service work. It really is. And I encourage new community members to put in their applications because you learn so much about your community that you thought you knew, and it becomes even rounder. I'd also like to thank the fellow commissioners. It's been a pleasure working with you. We've got Adam Elg here tonight, duly observing this evening. I'm going to miss you very much. Miss the team. It's very rewarding to have worked with you, and I agree with Jeff. We had a lot of great dialogue, not always agreement, but great dialogue, and I think we've even managed to come up with a lot of consensus and unanimous decisions in our findings, which tells me that we took the time to have the conversation and to weigh all the aspects of the different projects and things that we were working on. So changing my mind. I'm happy I changed someone's mind here at least once, but yeah, changing my mind as well. And that's important to be able to have that flexibility of thinking. Finally, I'd like to thank staff because you guys have an enormous amount of patience to teach and learn along with your resident colleagues. And I appreciate the timeless conversations about, you know, not just learning the aspects of what Planning Commission's role is, its limitations, and where it can be expanded, but also the protocol and trying to run efficient meetings. You know, I'm not the first, and I won't be the last person that you take time to explain the same thing, and hopefully we hear it and then do it. But you know, we all appreciate it, and I certainly really did appreciate it because it gave me the confidence to get up there and do a bit of leading and acting. Hopefully more of one and not the other. But anyway, this has been a great experience, and I'm very grateful. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Excellent. We are going to recognize another community member, Polly Anderson, even though she couldn't be here tonight, but she's going away on an extended stay that I'll reference later. So we're going to go ahead and recognize her, and she'll pick up her plaque when she returns from her extended leave. So again, over to you, City Manager Dahl.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just to add on, I think you said it well. Polly Anderson has served the Energy Environment Committee since its inception for the last 6 years. I believe she started out as the first chair alongside with the council liaison, Buchanan, at that point in time. And she was really instrumental in having that committee get its legs underneath it, and really help move the needle to allow the Energy Environment Committee, which is all about sustainability, to be sustaining in of itself. And they've developed annual work plans and really have done some significant work with solar energy, bringing out Excel Energy to help our residents conserve power. So she's been leading that on the front end, and she's elected to do some other things in her life. So we're going to miss her dearly. We appreciate her 6 years of service to the community, and hopefully we're going to be seeing her around as well. But we'll make sure we we'll get that award to her as well.
Other comments from council about Polly Anderson?
About Polly.
Go ahead.
I'll just take a moment. I just want to recognize Polly as well for so much hard work and dedication to the environment. It was such a dear cause from her, and I mean, the first time I ever met her, we were walking, we bumped into each other walking, and she told me her favorite tree. And I also had a favorite tree. She was just so sweet and so generous with her time, and really just a lovely person. And she will be very missed as well. So I just thought I would share that.
Thank you. Other comments?
So I don't know Polly very well, but I just wanted to applaud her and the committee for what they're doing here in Wayzata, and making our community more sustainable is absolutely essential. And I just had the wonderful experience of hearing a lot about the climate and about the state of our water situation globally, the state of plastics in the ocean, and boy, the more we can do here, right here at home, is the only conclusion I came to that could absolutely help, because it all starts here, where we are here. And so I really appreciate that committee, and I came back wanting to learn more about what we're doing here in Wayzata. So just thought this would be a good time to mention that. So thank you, Polly, for being a part of that committee.
Go ahead.
And I'll weigh in. I'm sorry that she's not here to hear these comments. I expect she's either watching live online. Well, no, she has a life, so she's probably doing something else. But she'll watch a recording at some point. But I just wanted to say that, you know, somebody who's got a passion, a deep passion for a topic like that can sometimes be a little abrasive or a little bit too forward. Not Polly. She's one of the nicest people you'll ever meet. And she may advance an idea, but she'll do it with such grace and kindness that you kind of say, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, even if you don't agree. Although I tend to agree with her. So I am going to miss her. I hope she sticks around the community as well, because she really is such a nice person.
Yeah, thank you. So I had a chance to visit with Polly on the phone today, and I'm glad I caught her, and I'll tell you about that in a second. I first met Polly when I lived on Chicago Avenue. She lived a few houses down from me on Chicago Avenue with her husband, Mark. So that's when I first got to know her. And again, I wasn't serving when she did all this great work on the Energy Committee. But some of the things I think she's most proud of, at least that she conveyed to me, was working very hard on the revised tree ordinance a few years ago. She very much wanted to see some changes there and was successful in getting that changed. She worked extremely hard on getting the city to align and implement a solar strategy for city buildings, which, you know, I just was reading, you know, the little pamphlet about, you know, the city hall, fire station, public library, the muni and public works, all powered by solar now, in large part to the contributions of Polly and other on that committee. And then she spearheaded the Energy Action Plan with Excel Energy, where through that they're given some resources to help lift up and honor folks in the community that are implementing sustainable practices and sustainable initiatives. And so I think there's been a few award winners along those lines. She's actually stepping down into something kind of cool. Her son Ian actually is attempting to be the first person to bike across all 7 continents, including Antarctica. And he's got 4 down with 3 to go, and Mom is accompanying Ian on the Asia and European aspects of that trip as support. I don't think she's going to go to Antarctica. That sounds a little bit kind of crazy, going on a bike with a sled and all that. But he's going to try to literally bike around the world. So if you want to follow him, he actually has a really great Instagram site at Ride with Ian, and maybe we'll see Polly popping up in Asia and Europe as he takes that leg of his trip. So, good excuse for not being here tonight. I can't say that I matched that. She's literally embarking on that trip today or tomorrow. So, kudos to you, Polly, and you can pick up your plaque when you return, and we expect some pictures. So, all right. Do we have anything else on public commentary? Anything from Zoom?
Mr. Mayor, we do not.
Okay, next on the agenda is new agenda items. Is anyone have any new agenda items to discuss or bring up at this time?
Nope.
Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. The next item is the approval of the consent agenda. On the consent agenda tonight is approval of City Council workshop and regular meeting minutes of January 7th, 2025. the approval of the check register, approval of municipal licenses, the receipt of the police activity report, the receipt of the building activity report, the approval of the 2024 State of Minnesota Pay Equity Implementation Report, adoption of Resolution 02-2025, accepting a donation from the Wayzata Lions and Wayzata American Legion Post 118 to our fire department, adoption of Resolution 03-2025, appointing Sue Ankeny to the Planning Commission. As noted earlier, Larissa Stockton chose to resign with 1 year left in her term, and so on the consent agenda would be appointing Sue Ankeny, who had applied for that position, to serve out the remainder of that term. And then lastly, do we have any questions or wishes to pull anything off the consent agenda? Go ahead.
I don't intend to pull anything, but I've got one question and one comment, two different items. The question I've got relates to item 7F, approval of the 2024 State Pay Equity Implementation Report. Typically, when we get a report, we just receive it rather than approve it. So I'm curious, are we actually approving a report, or are we just receiving the report?
Great question, Councilmember Pluckish. In this case, we are approving it, so it does need to be approved by the council and then sent to the state ultimately. This is part of their approval process, and I think it's just for transparency purposes.
Okay. And then the comment I had regarding Sue Ankeny being on the Planning Commission, I didn't want to just sweep that into a consent agenda without saying something about it. I'm actually delighted that she's going to be part of the Planning Commission. She's a neighbor. I've gotten to know her a little bit, not a whole lot, but enough to know that I think she's going to be a great addition to the Planning Commission, so welcome.
Yeah, thank you for those comments. So then I would need a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make that motion.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 The motion passes. Now we're on to new business. And first up is consider approval of the first reading of ordinance 846, amending chapters 920 and 955 of the Wayzata zoning ordinance to address home design setbacks. I guess I'll be turning over to Jeff or to Valerie, or who does this go to?
Mr. Mayor, I'll just do the quick intro, and really my intro is our Ms. Quarles is going to take this, but I wanted to just real quickly say I'm not going to refer to her as the assistant planner anymore. I'm going to refer to her as the city planner because she's been promoted to our city planner. So City Planner Quarles is going to take this one.
All right.
Thank you. All right, I won't reread this title again. It's
Yeah,
far
it's a
too
mouthful.
long. We've been, shorthand, we've been referring to it as just the R3A redevelopment study. For a little bit of background, in the summer of 2024, so a little while back now, we started to hear some concerns from the community and from council about the fast pace and overall character of a lot of single-family redevelopment in our core neighborhoods. When I say core neighborhoods in this case, I'm thinking north of Wayzata Boulevard, so between Berry, Highway 12, and Gleason Creek. In response to these concerns, we held a workshop with council in September. As a result of that workshop, staff was directed to prepare a moratorium on redevelopment for consideration specifically within this area. That moratorium was brought to the council in October and failed, so there was not a moratorium and development continued. In the meantime, the scope of examination for this area expanded to the entire R3A district instead of just that neighborhood, so that's everything on this map that's in orange. In October, we held a workshop with the Planning Commission on 10 potential zoning changes. Some of them were pretty far out there, some of them were more reasonable. The idea was we wanted to make sure we got feedback from the Planning Commission on everything and then narrowed down from there. In November, we opened up a community visual preference survey showing a couple of different homes in town and basically asking the community to react. What are the things you like about these houses? What are the things you don't like about these houses? What other concerns or positive things do you have to say about, the character of redevelopment in your neighborhood? There's a summary of the community engagement results in the packet, but overall it was not as heavy a consensus as I would have thought going into the survey. There are certainly many people who are concerned about a lot of the homogeneity of houses that are going up in their neighborhood, but there are also plenty of people who are happy that their property values are going up and they love the new character of homes too. So pretty split. In November, we also sent a memo to a lot of our local single-family builders for comment. We wanted to take the same 10 zoning solutions that we had given to the Planning Commission and also send it their way, because those are the folks that apply for building permits and can comment a little bit on the practicality of some of those solutions. And then finally, at the end of all that, we had open houses for residents and builders on November 25th and got a lot of good feedback and conversation out of that discussion. In December, we took our 10 solutions and reduced them down to 2 and fine-tuned them. At that time, the public hearing notice, which had gone out to R3A residents, was also noted in the Wayzata Weekly. I just note that because one of our changes affects a little bit more than R3A. The conclusions that we got out of our resident engagement is that generally, residents like homes that are smaller, appear charming, have that front yard and are more oriented towards the street, and that they de-emphasize the garage and the driveway. So those are not the main features of the home. It's not dominated by a garage. Residents also believe elements like landscaping, setbacks, front doors, porches, and overall hardcover or impervious surface are the most important factors for neighborhood character. But they are split on most other issues, including, is redevelopment overall positive? Is the impact to their property personally good or bad? And overall, what's the role of the city in further regulating or not regulating these issues? I think that the most important consideration that came out of that survey was that we asked whether variety in new homes was more important or uniformity in new homes was more important. Basically, if we could have every home look exactly how you wanted it to look, would you prefer that? Or would you prefer a little bit more variety? And variety was the overwhelming answer. So that shaped a lot of how we talked about how intense our zoning solutions were. So we have 2 to approve tonight. The first is reducing the side yard setback for driveways and curb cuts. Today, our side yard setback for a driveway is 10 feet. So you can't have any pavement if you're going to build new within 10 feet of a side lot line. Same with the curb cut. What this means is that the side yard is grass and pushes that driveway inward. However, on a lot of the narrower R3A lots, what this means is that the driveway gets pushed to the middle of the property, therefore forcing the garage to be in front. What we were seeing was that if we allowed a little bit more leniency and allowed the driveway to sort of snake around the house to the back, that a lot more builders were interested in doing garages in the rear of the house, those sort of side-loading ones you see on some properties. That's a little bit more of an incentive for builders as opposed to a restriction, and based on some of the building permits we've had to reject in the past, we think it's something that more builders will take advantage of. So that's one way to take that garage out of the front and put it in the back without forcing that to happen on lots where it might not make sense for that to happen. We expanded that particular measure to all of our residential districts besides R5 because it comes up a lot. And between planning and public works, the staff discussion was that, it really brings nothing but benefits. It brings some current nonconformities into compliance. So some current driveways that are really far over are now more compliant, and then has probably the most marked impact in our smaller districts, so we'll have even less of an impact in our larger districts that require bigger frontages. The other measure that we're introducing is a front yard setback that is increased, but only for garages. So within the R3A district, we have a setback of 20 feet. That's feeling really close to the street for a lot of residents. However, in our research, looking at all of the sort of historic setbacks around the neighborhood, 20 feet has shown up in every decade, basically. It's not like 20 feet is sort of creeping closer over time. There are houses that are built in the 1910s that are just 20 feet from the street. So it was really more of a question of scale and what features were in front. So the proposed garage setback brings back that garage to 25 feet instead of 20. So there are a couple options that can come out of that design-wise. That either means that, part of the house is further forward and the garage is further back, or the whole house is pushed a little bit further back, which is also something that residents stated they would want to see. So it doesn't bring a lot of homes out of compliance by saying, oh, there's a structure that's too far forward now, but it does bring those new garages further back. Again, that's something that's more restrictive than it is today, but it's not as intense as some of our previously proposed solutions. It's pretty scaled back. If we have any questions about these, I'm happy to run through them, but those are some of the solutions that we tabled that were either, too intense or not effective or just wouldn't give us the outcome that we were looking for. The Planning Commission discussed other communities with narrow lots and how they handle home design, talked about the community engagement process, architectural trends, and again, after a long community engagement process, the relatively restrained nature of the proposed regulations. We had one public commenter who verbally commented on what it would mean to rebuild their particular home, and so we ended up having a separate conversation. And overall, the commission ended up recommending approval by a vote of 4-0. So the proposed motion would be to approve the first reading of the ordinance. Thank you.
Questions of staff from council? Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I actually asked this question earlier in the afternoon, but I'm not sure I got quite a clear answer, at least not clear enough for me. So let me ask, the setback for hard surface or impervious surface has been reduced for the purpose of design to put garage entry in the back as one outcome, is that correct?
Yes, so if you have a little bit more room in the side yard to put that driveway, instead of having to set it so far away from the side yard, it gives room for the driveway to snake around to the back.
Right, so we're reducing it from 10 feet.
To 3 feet.
What are we, to 3 feet? So that actually points my question, because in the proposed ordinance, I'll read it here, this is on page 63 of our packet, that's under setbacks. It says front, side, and rear setbacks of at least 10 feet from property lines shall be maintained from parking areas in all zoning districts except, and then it's got a list of
Any
zoning districts. So the 10-foot restriction is accepted for those zoning districts, but it doesn't say what it's going down to. So I'm curious where the 3 feet comes in. Because if you read it and there's no other description, it sounds like the setback goes from 10 feet to 0.
I'm happy to pull that up real quick.
Yeah, right there. That's D1. So if you read the first sentence there, it says it's 10 feet except for all these districts. And then the next sentence only addresses the commercial districts, but not the residential. So if the rear setback of at least 10 feet is now vacated for those areas, it seems to me it would go to 0. So where's the 3 feet in here?
Item 3, under D. So if you go down 2 items, it says a side setback of at least 3 feet from property lines, and then it names those same districts.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay.
Other questions of staff? Okay, so what we have before us then is adjustments to ordinance 846. And the changes are in section 1.1, section 1.2, not section 1.2, section 1.3, and then 1.8. I don't know why it jumps from 1 to 8. That's kind of odd, under design. And then in section 2, there's a change under 3, sorry. And all this relates to front yard, 25 feet from 20, 10 to 3 on the side. So I guess, is there any further comments on this before we move to a motion? Are there comments as to the ordinance as written?
I don't have, I guess, yeah, I do. I just wanted to comment and express my support of these tweaks and changes, and then also kind of give it up to staff for this one in particular, always, but for this one, I just really appreciated how quickly everyone came to the table, and also thank you guys too for being willing to take this up so quickly and put it as a priority, which I know means that something gets pushed down the list. So it was a sacrifice, but I think a really great one. And I'm very impressed with how many public comments we got, especially from specific residents in that neighborhood. So that was really rewarding for me to see. I'm like, okay, good. This is on people's mind, and we're addressing it and taking action. And one last thing too, in the packet, I found it really helpful to have you guys go through those alternative 10-ish things that were considered, and then explain really, really well why those weren't the best options, because I had a few moments I thought, what about, oh. So just wanted to say thank you and great work, and that I'm excited to get this rolling. So thanks.
Any other comments on the draft ordinance? Okay, I don't have any comments either. So I guess we are now looking for a motion to approve the first reading of the ordinance 846, amending chapters 920 and 955 of the Wayzata zoning ordinance to address home design. So I would ask for a motion to approve that first reading.
I'll make that motion, Mayor.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second. Do we have any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 All opposed say no. Motion passes. The next item is 8B, to consider approval of first reading of ordinance 847, amending, which is the next one on the ordinance roster, ordinance 847, amending design standards of chapter 909. City manager.
Mr. Mayor, City Planner Quarles is going to take this one as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, City Manager Dahl. All right, so this one is a little more wordy than that one. But for some background, we've had design standards in town for a long time, but we did a really major rewrite in 2021, overhauled them completely, came up with this amazing new handbook, and they've been guiding most of our new developments since then. It's been very, very cool to be able to implement urban design principles into new development and have them codified instead of having to, sort of encourage developers to try to do something that's a little more aesthetic. It's nice to have a set of standards that guide that. But over time, implementing over the last couple years, we've definitely noticed some things where a little tweak here or there can make that implementation a lot easier. The proposed list of updates is mostly meant to address common questions, either questions that staff has to ask and answer over and over, or that developers are asking, and improve administrative efficiency. The Planning Commission reviewed a draft at their November 18th workshop and provided feedback. It's a citywide change, so there's no additional neighborhood notification requirement besides the newspaper. The Planning Commission looked at it again at December 16th, but didn't talk about it much more because they had considered it pretty extensively at that workshop. So I'm not going to read every single one of these. I'm just going to summarize them, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to go back to an individual slide. This change is meant to address massing breaks. We have a specific requirement for massing breaks in buildings that are between Lake Street and the shoreline of the lake, talking about how exactly those should provide a massing break and why it's there. We added a couple of words just to understand that not all parcels south of Lake Street have a direct view of Lake Minnetonka. So what this does is essentially give an applicant an opportunity to show or prove that some part of their site maybe doesn't have that view. We have that as a de facto option now, but we wanted to formalize it. We also ask for something called upper story step backs in a lot of areas, and that basically says that the uppermost part of the building has to come back a certain percentage of the facade length, and what that does is allow more light, more air to come down to ground level and improve the pedestrian experience. We previously just said that it was at the highest occupiable story in certain areas, and we wanted to clarify that that story is the third story generally, and that two-story buildings are not required to have a step back. This was that highest occupiable story note used to be in case we ever had a four-story building, that would go up to the fourth and not the third, but the Planning Commission's feedback was that they wanted it to start at the third, so we clarified that. Rooftop equipment on Lake Street and in the Bluff District, we don't allow mechanical equipment on the roof deck on new buildings. That's because you can look down the hill and out towards the lake and not see mechanical equipment on roofs. That's not, blocking or unsightly. What we wanted to provide for is that there are some buildings that have basically made a little notch, like above their second floor, so that their rooftop equipment is technically above the building, but not sticking out from the second floor. And so we just wanted to codify that as an acceptable solution, basically doing a little notch. The building that Grocer's Table in is a good example of this. It's kind of, the screening ends up blending right in with the wall of the second floor, and you can't tell. So we just wanted to ensure that visibility from the street and that sort of visibility was the biggest thing to consider, rather than exactly saying, well, technically now that's a roof, and confusing people. We also made some changes to rooftop equipment in the Wayzata Boulevard district. This was primarily in response to the design deviations that the Wells Fargo project got. There was a lot of discussion after the fact about, if you've got larger rooftop equipment for a commercial building, which is generally necessary, but you can't see it from the street, how much does the city actually care in that case? And so what we ended up doing was relaxing that standard a little bit and matching it more with our other standards for rooftop items, whether that's, chimneys or elevator penthouses or all that sort of thing. So that's a little bit more in line with that. There's still a limit on how much mechanical equipment you can have up there, but it's not as restrictive as it was before, and it's a little bit in line with the market and both what our actual priorities are in terms of design. Similarly, that notch approach that I mentioned can be used in other districts besides Lake and Bluff. There's a note about rooftop equipment deviations. There was some confusion about how best to administer these. A deviation is when you want to do something different than what the design standards say. It's not quite the same as a variance. There's a different set of criteria. But we have what's called significant deviations, which are the ones that always come in front of Planning Commission and City Council for approval, and then minor deviations, so ones that don't quite meet the threshold for everybody needing to talk about it. That's stuff like bicycle parking or, a certain type of brick is not something that the council needs to talk about. But rooftop mechanical equipment was also on that list. And so because we relaxed on the size and the location of mechanical equipment, we also wanted to move it into that significant deviation category. And that's because, listen, we relaxed on the size, but if you want to go even bigger than that, then yes, we do need to talk about it in a public forum, and we do have that ability now. But even we have typically preferred to review rooftop mechanical equipment deviations with the Planning Commission, City Council, but now we have to instead of preferring to. Finally, a lot of this process is administrative. When it comes to design review, typically council is only seeing deviations, but city staff is often determining what is a deviation and what is not a deviation. So previously, we didn't have an appeal process for staff's determination, and now we do. So if an applicant wants to appeal staff's ruling on whether something is a deviation or not, we'll treat it as a variance, and we'll bring it forward to the Planning Commission and to the council. These are super minor. This is about
Can you go
masonry
back,
and lighting.
just
Yep.
one? So you just said that it wasn't a variance, but it is a variance, so you confused me by your comments versus
point.
what's written on the slide here. So could you clarify that for me further?
Yes, so I'm sorry, I totally misspoke on that. Great catch. So I totally rushed right through that, my apologies.
Oh, that's okay. I just want to make sure we clarified it.
that's
So
good.
No problem. We'll just clarify it.
Yeah, so when staff, minor deviations are administratively approved. And that means that staff can either administratively approve them or deny them. And so appealing that denial is what now goes in front of council and is subject to the major deviation process.
Got it.
Before, the process would have defaulted to variances because it was, going against a staff determination.
Exactly the clarification I was looking for.
Great
Thank
call.
you, planner.
These two are quite minor. We had a typo in one of our lighting standards, and we are updating our masonry thickness and treatment rules to just be more in line with what the market actually
I
dictates.
had a related question to that. On
Yep.
page 86 of the packet, you outline the things we're asking to change. Is this a typo where it says parking lot lighting? Should it say parking
It should
lot
say
lighting?
parking.
Okay,
Good call.
all right, cool. Thank you. Sorry, just wanted to clarify those two things. And then,
Not a brand-new type of lot that we've come up with or anything.
hey, could be, you never know. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. After masonry and lighting, it's just the proposed motion to approve the ordinance.
Okay. Do we have questions of staff? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor and Planner Quarles. I recall having a really good grasp of the notch thing for the mechanical equipment when you guys reviewed this at Planning Commission. I think you had a visual, which must have been really helpful for me because now I can't quite picture it. And I can be specific on what my concern is, that if it's, a notch to me sounds like a U, so it's open on one end. And I guess my concern is if we're being really aware of the views from above towards the lake, are we being that thoughtful about the views coming from the lake?
Okay. So mechanical equipment is still required to be screened.
It is.
So in this case, I think probably an L shape is the best way to think about it. So think about like substituting a portion of the second or third floor for mechanical equipment, screening it so it looks like a wall in the same way that, there's building on either side of it. If you were to look up from the lake, you would think it was part of the building instead of something sticking out from the building.
Okay.
And then one smaller part of the way that code is written is that mechanical equipment can't stick up out of that. It has to be below the level of the roof deck because we didn't want applicants just dropping down their equipment a little and then just sticking up anyway and defeating the purpose of the prohibition on Lake Street.
Okay, super helpful and exactly what I wanted to hear too, so.
Other questions of staff? Okay, so what we're being asked to approve in the first reading is these changes or minor adjustments to ordinance 847 around building width, upper story building setbacks designed to help with viewscapes, roof equipment screening, building materials, parking lot lighting, and then the deviation process to not force variances, but an appeal process for deviations and a chance to venue that with the planning commission and the council. So any further comments on what we're being asked to approve in our first reading here? I have one question for David. So this is a first reading, it has a second reading, then it becomes in effect. So my question is, for any applications that are active with the city, does it apply to that, or does it only apply to applications that come in net new from the second reading?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. So in general, we apply the law that's in effect at the time we make the decision.
Okay.
So, it's looking at the timing of things. But basically, if you were making the decision tonight on the design deviation would really be your only decision, you wouldn't apply this.
Right.
Because it won't be effect until this is read twice
Second time,
and
yeah.
published.
Yep. So then it's just basically anything that comes across the planning commission or the council desk from that date forward, this should be applied.
Yes, because the timing of a new application now, by the time it goes to
It's
planning.
about when it's venued, basically.
Yeah.
Okay, not when it applied. Okay, that was the only further clarification I had. All right, so any further comments? Otherwise, I would accept a motion for the approval of the first reading of ordinance 847, amending the design standards of chapter 909.
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Nay? None. It passes. Now, this one is the one that Councilmember Parkhill made reference to in approving the agenda. So I think what we'd like to do is venue the next item, which is 8C, to consider the first reading of ordinance 848, amending the city code, chapter 815.05, around crime-free, drug-free training for rental housing licenses. So I think before we go into presentation, I think let's just at least give Councilmember Parkhill the chance to ask for the table, and then we'll welcome further dialogue about it and see if we reach consensus to table it or if we're going to actually go through a process to review it tonight. So go ahead, Councilmember Parkhill.
Well, I kind of want to get a feel for what this training is all about before we pass this, because I guess, is it important? Is it not? I think who should it be important for? Does it really? Do we have drug issues in Wayzata? Do we have leasing issues in Wayzata? Is this an onerous, overreaching request of somebody to go spend their day doing this if they just want to rent their house? It seems to me a violation of freedom, but I feel like that I am willing to do the due diligence and assess that for myself, because I'm the one that brought that up.
Okay, so if I could just play back what I heard to make sure I get it right. You're suggesting it be tabled because you'd want further time to study this issue before it's venued for a change to the ordinance as written. Okay, so before that motion occurs, I think Councilmember McDonald wanted to offer some commentary or some questions before we look to see if we're going to act on tabling it.
Okay.
Go ahead, Councilmember
Yeah, thank you, Mayor and Councilmember Parkhill. I was planning to make some comments about this item in regards to our plans to study the short-term rental ordinances, and I figured this would be kind of swooped up in that. I was just going to mention that I would have felt more comfortable evaluating the necessity of this training once I'd heard through that public engagement from either the property owners or the neighbors. So I'm totally okay with tabling it since I don't think I felt like I had a good enough grasp of what the community needed or wanted. So I just would hope that that table would let us get through at least the public engagement portion of that short-term rental.
Okay.
Thanks.
Further comments on Councilmember Parkhill's suggestion to table it?
I'll just say I'm okay with tabling it, but just to make sure that I understand what it was before us is we now have a requirement that people go through this training in all regards for rentals, and this was only about making that less restrictive by exempting people who own their homes. So if we table it, we're basically keeping it more restrictive until we make some other decision. Is that correct?
More restrictive also is the status quo, but yes.
Right? So I'm okay with tabling. I would have been perfectly fine making things a little less restrictive on our homeowners, but okay if we want to table it for future discussion.
Well, so let's try this. Let's see if, why don't you make a motion, Councilmember Parkhill, to decide why you want to table it, and then if you could maybe make reference, or we can have a friendly amendment to a time box or time frame. I think Councilmember McDonald's suggesting after we do the public engagement to the overall, like Airbnb, short B&B. So see if that holds for a motion to table with that suggestion.
So I would like to table this resolution for the purpose of doing more due diligence, for the purpose of possibly making an argument for making it even less restrictive.
Okay. And then are you okay with sort of time boxing it around the public engagement process for short-term rental so it kind of comes back as one?
Assuming that's in the next 90 days or something, yeah, I think so. I mean, maybe they could be separated, but I don't know when we're planning to do that.
Councilmember Plekish, Mayor Mullen, we have it on our strategic plan for this year. I don't think we'll be able to come back with an ordinance within 90 days, but it will be, hopefully second quarter. It depends on how long the engagement process lasts, honestly, but 90 days is too quick, probably.
I also see it as completely a separate issue from the short-term rental because this is all about somebody renting their home theoretically for a longer period of time, 6 months, or it's not a short-term renter in my mind is 30 days or less. And I have no interest in putting less restrictions on 30-day or less rentals. I'm looking for that person that is leaving for a year on a sabbatical or something that doesn't have to take a day to go study.
Yeah, I get it. Well, I'm not
having that freedom to be able to rent their home without a lot of bureaucracy.
Sure. Councilmember Plekish, I believe you had a comment.
Well, you were reading my mind, I guess.
Yeah, well, I saw you kind of.
I think there's no downside for voting on this tonight, because if your ultimate goal, Councilmember Parkhill, is to evaluate this to make it even less restrictive, well, what we're doing tonight would be making it less restrictive. and we could come back at some other time to make it even less restrictive than that. So I don't see any downside to doing this. The downside would be that it's more restrictive now. We could make it less restrictive for some period of time, and then if down the road we felt that it's still too restrictive, we can always come back and change it again. So I don't know why we need to table this right now, because I see no downside for doing it.
So Councilmember Plekish offered a friendly suggestion. I guess I would leave it up to you if you'd like to make a motion to table or if we'd like to continue to review and act on it.
My thought was, if we pass it now, then it's off the radar. And my idea was, my desire was to still maintain some sense of urgency about it, which I was very grateful that we have addressed this so quickly. And so I was planning to, attend this class as soon as humanly possible. I don't know how often they're
Tomorrow.
how often they're
Tonight.
offered, whether it's, so,
Why don't we do this, Jeff? Why don't you make a motion and see if it holds to table? And if it doesn't, then we'll hear it and move on. How does that sound?
I would also like to say, I'm sorry, this is getting so confusing, but I guess I apologize. I thought this training would be swooped up in short-term rentals. So if I'm the one putting a longer timeline on the table, that's okay. For me, when I read through this, I kept thinking to myself, why are we doing this? I haven't heard from any community member. I haven't heard from any property owner. So to me, that felt like an opportunity to hear directly from someone who would be affected by this. However, it doesn't sound like those are the people who will be engaging with for the short. So just a little caveat that timeline-wise.
this was created by me.
Well, let's
As a landlord and as somebody who's done this for 30 years, there's no other community that I know of in the country that has this.
yeah. Well, let's
Other than the state of Minnesota, I guess.
well, let's see if your motion to table holds or not, and if it doesn't, then we'll review it.
Okay. My motion to table stands.
Okay. Do I have a second to table this to a future date?
Just any date.
Well, I guess we don't have consensus on a timetable, so it would be. We don't have to have a timetable. We're just tabling it.
Be nice, but it doesn't have to.
Okay.
May.
So we have a motion.
Table to May.
We need a second.
Okay, well, I'll second that for Councilmember Parkhill.
Okay. Further discussion. Okay. All in favor of tabling, say aye.
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 Those opposed?
Nay.
Nay. That would pass. We're going to table that motion to the future. I guess my comment would be, perhaps because we all were a little bit confused about the intent and purpose of this, when you do bring it back, could you be more clear to articulate to us short-term versus long-term and sort of tease out some of the comments that were made here so that we have a better understanding of what we're actually reviewing?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so then the next thing I believe that we have is the city manager report. Mr. Dahl.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple things tonight. One, I just wanted to highlight a project that's going on, that's pending actually, could happen later this year. 641 Central Avenue is a unique project where part of the Karish building, which is
41
Lake Street, I'm sorry, is a unique project where part of the building, the 600 block, the Karish building, where the marquee is going to be demolished and then rebuilt. Same footprint, a little bit different facade, and a little bit higher. The height will increase from 25 feet to 30 feet. Because it's a portion of the building, not more than 50%, because it's not currently under a PUD, because it's not asking for any type of exception or design deviation. It only, to our knowledge, requires administrative approval. So we are triple checking that, but our intention is that after we get done with our thorough building permit review process, that they would be issued a building permit and then could, start construction this spring. Despite it being admin review, all the information is on our website. We're going to put some more information on our Wayzata Weekly, just so people know about it. And feel free to call our planning staff for folks if they have any questions about the actual site or the process, because it is a little bit different than our typical development process. So happy to answer any
So I
questions.
just have a couple comments on this one and certainly open it up for others. So you may have received inquiries from the public. I have about this project. It appeared on the website in the last week to 10 days with communication going back to November. And it also appeared on our website under a section called approved projects. And that caused some confusion and or maybe misunderstanding in the public about, a prominent building not going through planning commission and council. Appropriately so, I think. I had asked staff to make that correction to the website, and they've done so it no longer sits under approved project. It's not an approved project, and it clearly states administrative approval. So hopefully that clears that up. I know that City Manager Dahl and I are going to be meeting with some community members that express concern. I encourage all council members, as they wish, to meet with community members to express those concerns. We will also be talking to the Carishes to just make them aware of the feedback that was received, and just to kind of clear and make sure that we're all on the same page as to how the city is addressing this development, why it's considered administrative, because it's less than 50% of the overall block, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I open it up to any other questions of my colleagues on this topic. Go ahead.
Just a curiosity, the marquee that's there now, will that be demolished?
No, Councilmember Plukish. It's just the far end where typically it's known as the Caribou
Yeah, what
part of the
Caribou
building.
Okay.
And it's really just being demolished and rebuilt to improve its marketability, to have higher ceilings so they can,
Julie
maximize
was
it
a
more.
tenant. I can't remember who else was in there at this time. Yeah.
Historic home? Historic studio, thank you.
Okay. Other questions of staff on this topic? Okay, go ahead.
Cool, thank you. Just wanted to call out, it was on the consent agenda, special thanks to the American Legion and the Wayzata Lions for their continued generosity in giving a significant amount of their charitable gambling funds to the fire department for equipment purposes. I did ask them to, if they would be so kind, to put together kind of an annual update or report and to come to a future city council meeting so they can promote themselves, their work that they're doing, how how things are going this year versus last year, and all the other great impacts they're having with their donations throughout the community and region. So expect them to make a presentation with the next couple meetings. Lastly, I also wanted to thank all the folks that came out. The mayor was there, some staff was there for Family Skate Day. It had been rescheduled because of the bitter cold the week prior. The skating rink is open. We had great amount of people at skating day, and we've had great amount of folks coming in skating right now. It's like a Norman Rockwell photo out there,
And
or
unfortunately, now
painting.
it's closed again, thanks to the weather.
Yeah, it's closed. Hopefully it'll be open. The Public Works can smooth it out, and it's going to get cold again. So hopefully we can get a few more weeks after this hot spell ends. So thanks to everybody who came out, though, for that day. That's all I have.
Okay. Any other comments from council? I just have one. This meeting is off cycle by a week because we didn't have a quorum for last week, so we'll be meeting again next Tuesday for all of the vast viewing public that wants to join us here or online. We will be here again next Tuesday. And with that, I would accept a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting.
I'll make that motion with one comment.
Go ahead.
Chili Open is coming up.
Very good.
If you don't have your tickets, buy your tickets to Chili Open. All right.
Fantastic. So we
Make
have
that motion to adjourn.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that passes and the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.